this is Mark Hutten, and welcome to today's show. This show is about autism spectrum disorders, and we take questions from everybody. If you're the parent of a child on the spectrum, if you are an individual with Asperger's or high-functioning autism, if you're a teacher, if you're a sibling, if you're a therapist, we'll take questions via email, and my email is mbhutton@gmail.com. Again, that is mbhutton@gmail.com. So if you're sitting at your computer and you have some questions, feel free to fire those off right now. Anything to do with autism spectrum disorders, then it's fair game. Okay, while we're waiting for some emails
If you have a strong-willed, out-of-control child, then by definition you have a very intense child. He enjoys intensity. He seeks intensity from others, especially you, his parent. Observe him sometime while he's playing video games. Watch how intense he is. Look at how he just feeds off of the energy of the game. Now, when you're animated, when you're arguing, lecturing, threatening, getting angry, and so on, you unfortunately are providing the very intensity that he wants. He has discovered that you're much more interesting when he behaves inappropriately. And if the intense child believes that he's going to get a bigger payoff for negative behaviors, then he's going to repeat that pattern over and over again. Now, intense kids are not out to get you as the parent, but they are out to get your energy, and they want you to be exciting to them. You could think of it as you, in a way, are your child's favorite toy or your child's favorite video game. And unfortunately, you are much more exciting when things are going wrong. So what you may have viewed as punishment or discipline was actually a reward. Your child got a bigger payoff, and I have seen many, many cases where a child is literally addicted to the parent's negative reactions. You can't really stop a child from breaking the rules. They already know what the rules are, and it gets old trying to convince them not to break the rules. But you can deliver a consequence in a way that doesn't accidentally reward his negative behavior. And you can give your child your energy when things are going right rather than when things are going wrong. So one of our major tenets in this methodology, when things are going wrong, we have to put on our poker face. We cannot show any emotion, because as soon as the child knows that he was successful in pushing our button, he will continue to push, push, push. Now, it's at this stage of the game when I often hear from parents that it's just too difficult to not get angry. They say things, like, well, if my child's misbehaving and he's calling me names or breaking stuff, it's just impossible for me to not get angry. Well, you know what? I disagree with that. It's not a question of whether you can or cannot put on your poker face. You've already done it. There's been times when you've gone to a restaurant and you've paid good money for a meal and you got lousy service and lousy food, and the waitress came by and asked you if everything was fine, and you put on your poker face and smiled and said, yes, everything's fine. And there may have been a time where you got pulled over by a police officer and you got a ticket that you couldn't afford and that you didn't feel that you deserved, and you could have told the cop to go to hell, but you didn't. You smiled, you signed the ticket, and you showed up to court. So it's not a question of whether you can or can't wear your poker face. You've already done it. It's possible. I know that it's hard. But you have to, when things are going wrong, you have to act as if you're unaffected. The reason being is because as soon as the child sees that you're upset, he knows he's winning. He knows he still has a chance. He knows he still might be able to whittle your no into a maybe and then into a yes. And then he, again, has figured out a way to get his way.
All children can have anger management issues from time to time. Asperger's children have a special challenge in this area because they have difficulty understanding emotions and their impact on others. In addition, teens with Asperger's aren't living in a void in which they don't understand that they are different from other kids. Often teased by their peers, they can have incipient anger they don't understand and can't easily control. Helping these children and teenagers with anger control issues requires a direct communication about the effect of their anger on others, as well as the methods of improving their low self-esteem and poor sense of self-worth, which is often at the root of the child's anger. Anger that is acted out badly needs to be treated like any other unwanted behavior. Some form of reasonable consequence directed at getting the point across that the behavior is wrong needs to be combined with a pragmatic discussion of the meaning behind the anger and other ways to control the anger. Also keep in mind that an effective consequence for an Asperger's child will be much different than an effective consequence for a typical child. If the anger seems to...
Now, your children have this huge need to belong, and all I mean by belong is they want to matter, they want to count, they want to feel important. And sometimes kids, in fact a lot of time, kids have mistaken beliefs as it relates to this huge need of theirs to belong. In stage 1, the child's belief, and it's a faulty belief, as it relates to belonging, is I only belong when I am being noticed or served by my parent. So if the parent provides opportunities for positive attention, problems don't usually grow. But if the parent doesn't provide these opportunities for positive attention, the child will get attention anyway by acting out. Now he's getting your negative attention. Now, if the parent gives in to this negative attention or gets mad and punishes the child for seeking negative attention, the child may stop for a short time, but soon he repeats this acting out behavior and moves on to stage 2. In stage 2, the child's misguided belief as it relates to belonging is, I belong only when I'm in control, or when I'm the boss, or when I can prove that no one else can boss me. So here again, if the parent withdraws from that power struggle, sets firm limits, takes action without getting angry, the problems usually don't get worse. But if the parent lets the kid be the boss, and with the overindulgent parent, oftentimes that's what happens. The kid becomes the boss, the tail's wagging the dog. So if the parent allows that to happen or fights back in anger, rages at the child, then the misbehavior continues and it gets steadily worse, and the child moves to stage 3. In stage 3, the child's misguided belief as it relates to belonging is, I only belong by hurting others as I feel hurt. So if the parent, again, sets firm limits, doesn't take these attacks personally, shows concern, gets the child to talk about his hurt feelings, stays consistent with discipline, then the problems start to heal. But if the parent gives in, or gives up, or lashes out, misbehavior continues and worsens, and the child will progress to stage 4. Now, in the 4th and final stage, and the child's mistaken belief, again, as it relates to belonging, is I belong only by convincing others not to expect anything from me. I am unable, I am helpless. Okay? So if you have a child who's 19, 21, 25 years old, still living at home, he's stuck here in stage 4. Here again, if the parent doesn't give up, maintains faith in the child, tries to arrange small successes that encourage the child, then the child begins to develop confidence and he begins to feel competent. If the parent gets busy with the business of fostering the development of self-reliance, then the child starts to develop emotionally, maybe for the first time in his life. But if the parent gives up or goes along with the child's misguided belief that he's helpless and weak and unable, then she has a child who's going to live at home well into his 20s or maybe even 30s. Now, at this point, some of you may be thinking that that's a ridiculous notion, that you'd actually have your child continue to live at home when he's well into his 20s or even early 30s. But the passive and overindulgent parent oftentimes simply cannot bring herself to the point where she insists that her adult child get an education, get a job, and get out of the house and to begin to develop a life of his own. It's very difficult for an overindulgent parent to do that. One of the challenges of an overindulgent parent is she has a child who has no intention of leaving the nest. Many overindulged 18 to 25-year-olds have either returned home from college or they've never left. We refer to these kids as boomerang kids. And it's not that they're bad kids, they're just, they haven't developed the self-reliance that we talk about in this program. So they're emotionally a little more like a teenager, and they simply can't function in the adult world yet. The reason that overindulged 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds don't want to leave the house is because they're unprepared. They're overwhelmed or unmotivated to live independently. They'd rather occupy the family home and play computer games and deliver pizza. The overindulged kids, not always, but oftentimes they grew up living the life of the privileged. In those cases, the well-meaning parents provided their children with all the amenities congruent with an affluent lifestyle. The overindulgent parent focused on doing more for their kids than their parents did for them at the expense of keeping their kids dependent. So their 19-year-old doesn't move out because he has it made. So when the parent's financial generosity isn't combined with teaching the kids how to become self-reliant at an early age, then we can't expect the kids to automatically possess adequate life skills when they reach legal adulthood.
Children with Asperger's and high-functioning autism are known to have several primary comorbid conditions. Now, a comorbid condition is simply a condition that goes along with having Asperger's. And one of these conditions is known as ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Sometimes these children can be misdiagnosed as only having the more common ADHD, with the Asperger's diagnosis being missed. Another primary comorbid condition is obsessive compulsive disorder. In some cases, this doesn't show up until the Asperger's child becomes an adult. What both conditions have in common is the need for order and the presence of compulsive and sometimes irrational repetitive behaviors. Now, some researchers believe that there is a neurological relationship between Asperger's and obsessive compulsive disorder. Another condition that goes along with Asperger's is depression, and depression seems to manifest itself mostly in the Asperger's teenager. Because teens with Asperger's know they are different and have difficulty relating to others, they often suffer from acute or chronic depression. Some teens can have anger or violent symptoms out of pure frustration for being out of place. There have been some reports of suicide and suicide attempts among Asperger's teens, but the symptoms of depression respond quite well to antidepressant therapy and also psychotherapy, which is aimed at helping the Asperger's teenager feel more accepted.
Now, here's how this starts out. Kids, in their attempt to get our attention and our energy, will use sneaky anger. Now, this is where your child wants to frustrate you. He may forget to do the things that you've asked. He may play dumb. He may show his anger by what he does not do. And there's a lot of whining and complaining that goes on at this stage. Now, if the parent responds or reacts to that or provides any intensity whatsoever in any shape, form, or fashion, the child moves to the next rung on the anger ladder. What the child does, if he gets a payoff for implementing sneaky anger, is he then begins to implement the cold shoulder. This is where your child ignores you, gives you the silent treatment, does a lot of pouting, and displays an attitude where he's feeling sorry for himself. And this is all an attempt to get you to feel guilty, get you to feel sorry for him, to get your intensity. Now, if you provide any intensity at the cold shoulder stage, then the child moves to the next rung on the anger ladder. The next stage, as we progress up the anger ladder, is blaming and shaming. Now, this is where your kid believes that there's something wrong with you, the parent, and he tells you so. He wants you to feel bad because he's mad, and he tells you that it's your fault. Okay? So, if the child gets a payoff at the cold shoulder stage, he goes to blaming and shaming. If he gets a payoff in the form of your intensity and reaction at the blaming and shaming stage, he moves on to the next rung on the anger ladder. The next rung involves swearing and screaming. This is where your child has discovered the use of profanity and how that really gets a reaction out of you. So at this stage, there's a lot of cuss words, a lot of name calling, and the child may do a lot of yelling and screaming and talking at the top of his lungs, all of which he has discovered gets a good reaction out of you. So if he gets a payoff for swearing and screaming, and he can push your buttons with that one, he moves on to the next rung. You may be able to tell at this point that as we move up the anger ladder, your child is quickly developing an addiction to your reactions. If, for example, he has been able to push your buttons for 13, 14, 15 years, then he's really developing a very strong appetite for more reaction from you. So the next rung on the anger ladder is demands and threats. Now this is where the child basically tells you that it's going to go my way or else. I'm going to have it my way, or I'm going to run away, or I'm going to go live with my dad, or I'm going to quit school, or I'm going to tear up the house. This is where the parent can really be legitimately intimidated by the child's behavior. And if you show any signs of being intimidated or any anger at all, the child moves to the next rung. The next stage we're going to refer to as level 1 violence. Now this is where physical violence can enter the picture. The violence is partially controlled, however, because the kid really knows what he's doing, even though later he might claim that it was an accident. Your child at this stage plans to stop acting out and throwing a fit or destroying property as soon as he gets his way. So if you give in, he'll kind of back off. At this stage, there's a lot of chasing that can go on, holding, destruction of property. At this stage, the cops are often called, and sometimes the parent goes out to juvenile probation and files an incorrigibility complaint or whatever. This is also the stage at which, if your child is smart enough, he calls the cops on you. A lot of teenagers know that all they have to do is call the police and scream abuse, and then now their parent is in trouble and being investigated by Child Protective Services. In the final stage, or the last rung on the anger ladder, we have level 2 violence, and this is where your kid's one and only goal is to destroy. He wants to destroy the relationship. He wants to destroy the house. He may push, shove, hit the parent. The child might not even be conscious of his actions during this level 2 violence. In other words, he slips into a blind rage. In worst case scenarios, the child at this level can become suicidal, homicidal. So if you have experienced full-blown domestic battery incidents with your child, then you've also experienced level 2 violence.
I often get the question from parents, and they ask, are there any medications on the market to treat Asperger's? If so, which ones have the greatest benefit? Well, because there's no identifiable biochemical problem in Asperger's or high-functioning autism, and because many researchers believe that the syndrome is a result of fundamental changes in the brain structure, medications will probably never treat or cure Asperger's. On the other hand, there are several medications that have been found to control some of the symptoms of Asperger's. One such medication is called atomoxetine, and this has been found to improve some of the aspects of Asperger's that mimic those of attention deficit disorder. Several studies have used the drug to reduce symptoms of irritability, social withdrawal, and repetitive speech seen in Asperger's. Medications normally directed toward treating obsessive-compulsive disorder have been tried in children with Asperger's who have shown obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Now, while the medication doesn't treat some of the core symptoms of Asperger's, it has been shown to improve OCD symptoms. Antidepressants can be attempted in Asperger's children who suffer from secondary depression. The depression isn't generally a part of the Asperger's condition itself, but is found as a result of some of the distressing life circumstances associated with this disorder. Many of these children and teenagers know that they don't fit in with others, and while some prefer social isolation, others grieve their lack of ability to get comfortable dealing with others. This and other issues of self-esteem can lead to depression, which is often manageable with antidepressant medication. Children and teenagers with Asperger's often suffer from debilitating insomnia. While it's best to use non-drug ways of controlling the symptoms, some children can make use of sleeping medication that doesn't have to be addicting. Sometimes a short course of sleeping medication can get the child back into a regular sleeping pattern. And lastly, medications directed at anxiety may be necessary when the child with Asperger's suffers from nervousness or irritability surrounding their life situations. Many Asperger's children and teenagers can become quite distressed by things not being the same or as expected, and anti-anxiety medication can help with this. In truth, there is no single medication or class of medications that works to treat many of the core symptoms of Asperger's. However, many of the secondary or related symptoms can be effectively managed with certain psychotropic medications. With respect to some of these symptoms associated with Asperger's, my personal bias is to attempt cognitive behavioral therapy first, and then supplements second, and as a last-ditch effort, when all else fails, then consult a child and adolescent psychiatrist for the proper medications. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again soon. If you have any questions, feel free to go to myaspergerschild.com, myaspergerschild.com. You'll see a link there with my email address, and feel free to ask whatever questions you have, and I can usually respond within 24 hours. Also, while you're over there at myaspergerschild.com, feel free to sign up for the free newsletter. This newsletter goes out twice a week, and I give you a bunch of good parenting skills that will help you with your child or teenager, or maybe your young adult who's still living at home. So until next time, this is Mark Hutten. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.